In a stadium of 30,000 people, there was only one sound, a crying child. The music had stopped. Elvis Presley stood frozen at the microphone, his white jumpsuit catching the stage lights, staring into the crowd. Then he did something that would change everything. He walked off the stage. The Memphis Coliseum fell into complete silence. Security guards looked at each other in confusion. Band members stopped playing. 30,000 people held their breath as the king of rock and roll disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind only the echo of a child's tears and the question that nobody could answer. Where was Elvis going? This is the story of the night Elvis broke every rule of show business. The night he chose love over performance. The night that would define his legacy forever. But to understand this moment, we need to go back to the beginning of that evening, when nobody knew that a 6-year-old girl named Sarah would change the course of music history. June 15, 1976. Memphis, Tennessee. The Memphis Coliseum was buzzing with anticipation. Elvis was performing in his hometown, the place where his legend was born, where every face in the crowd carried memories of watching a young man transform from a shy truck driver into the most famous entertainer on earth. Sarah Mitchell sat in the front row with her grandmother, clutching a small teddy bear named Blue. Sarah had been battling leukemia for 2 years. The doctors had given her family devastating news just 3 days earlier. There wasn't much time left. But Sarah had one dream, one wish that kept her fighting. She wanted to see Elvis Presley perform live. Her grandmother, Margaret, had spent her life savings on front row tickets. She knew this might be the last gift she could ever give her granddaughter. As they took their seats, Margaret watched Sarah's face light up with pure joy. For the first time in months, the little girl looked truly alive. Elvis appeared on stage at 8:30 p.m. to thunderous applause. He was magnificent that night, the white jumpsuit with its intricate golden details, the diamond-studded belt catching every spotlight, his hair perfectly styled. He opened with "CC Rider," and the crowd erupted. This was Elvis at his peak, commanding the stage with the charisma that had made him a global icon. Sarah was mesmerized. She had listened to Elvis records in the hospital, but seeing him live was like witnessing magic. She stood on her chair, her tiny hands clapping, her face glowing with happiness that seemed to chase away every shadow of her illness. But as the concert progressed, something began to change. Elvis was in the middle of "Love Me Tender" when he noticed her. Through the sea of faces, his eyes found this little girl in the front row. There was something about her that stopped him mid-verse. The band kept playing, but Elvis had gone quiet. He squinted through the stage lights, trying to see more clearly. The child was swaying to the music, but there was something fragile about her movement, something that spoke to a deeper story. Her grandmother held her steady, and Elvis could see tears glistening on the older woman's cheeks. During "Hound Dog," Elvis moved closer to the edge of the stage. He was known for connecting with his audience, for making eye contact, for making every person feel like he was singing directly to them. But this was different. His attention kept returning to the little girl in the front row. It was during the instrumental break of "Can't Help Falling in Love" that Elvis saw what would haunt him forever. Sarah had suddenly become very weak. Her grandmother was holding her up, whispering something in her ear. The little girl was crying now, not from sadness, but from exhaustion. The medicine, the treatments, the long journey to Memphis, it had all caught up with her at once. And that's when Elvis made a decision that would shock everyone in that arena. He stopped singing mid-sentence. The band, confused, slowly stopped playing. The arena fell into a silence so deep you could hear people's hearts beating. Elvis set down his microphone and walked off the stage. The backstage area erupted in chaos. Elvis's manager, Colonel Parker, rushed after him. "Elvis, what are you doing? There are 30,000 people out there." But Elvis wasn't listening. He was focused on something else entirely. Elvis found his assistant, Jerry Schilling, and gave him instructions that nobody expected. "Jerry, I need you to find the little girl in the front row. The one with the teddy bear. Bring her backstage. Now." Security was baffled. Band members were asking if Elvis was sick. The audience was starting to murmur, wondering if something terrible had happened. But Elvis was already moving with a purpose that surprised everyone who knew him. He went to his dressing room and picked up something very special, a scarf that had belonged to his mother, Gladys. Meanwhile, Jerry Schilling made his way through the crowd to the front row. When he reached Sarah and her grandmother, Margaret's face went white. She thought they were in trouble, that they had done something wrong. "Ma'am," Jerry said gently, "Elvis would like to meet your granddaughter backstage." Margaret couldn't speak. Sarah, despite her weakness, suddenly found energy she didn't know she had. "Really? Elvis wants to meet me?" As they were escorted backstage, Sarah clutched her teddy bear Blue with trembling hands. Her grandmother whispered prayers under her breath. Neither of them could believe this was really happening. Elvis was waiting in the corridor behind the stage. When he saw Sarah, his famous smile appeared, but his eyes were soft with concern. He knelt down to her level, making himself small so he wouldn't intimidate her. "Hello there, beautiful," Elvis said in that voice that had made millions fall in love. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she whispered, suddenly shy in the presence of her hero. "Sarah. That's a beautiful name for a beautiful girl. And who's this?" Elvis pointed to the teddy bear. "This is Blue. He goes everywhere with me. Even to the hospital." But here's the incredible part of this story. The part nobody expected. Elvis did something that would be talked about for generations. Elvis looked into Sarah's eyes and made her a promise. "Sarah, would you like to sing with me? On stage? In front of all those people?" Sarah's eyes went wide. Her grandmother gasped. "But Mr. Presley, she's very sick. I don't know if she has the strength." Elvis turned to Margaret with gentle eyes. "Ma'am, sometimes strength comes from the heart, not the body. Sarah, do you feel strong enough to sing with me?" The little girl nodded so hard her hair bounced. Elvis smiled and did something he had never done in 20 years of performing. He took off his mother's scarf, the one he kept for the most special moments, and gently tied it around Sarah's neck. "This was my mama's," he told her. "She would have loved you. Now it's yours." Then Elvis picked up Sarah, teddy bear and all, and carried her toward the stage. The crowd had been waiting for 20 minutes, and the murmur was growing louder. Some people were starting to leave, thinking the concert was over. But then the lights dimmed, and Elvis appeared at the edge of the stage, carrying a little girl in a hospital gown with a blue teddy bear. The arena fell silent again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of 30,000 people realizing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Elvis took the microphone and spoke to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my friend Sarah. She's traveled a long way to be here tonight, and she's been very brave. Sarah, would you like to tell everyone about Blue?" Sarah looked out at the sea of faces, and instead of being scared, she felt protected in Elvis's arms. "This is Blue," she said into the microphone, her small voice echoing through the arena. "He's my best friend. We're both very sick, but we came to see Elvis because he makes us feel better." There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Grown men were crying. Women were clutching their hearts. But Elvis wasn't finished. "Sarah," Elvis said, "would you help me sing a special song? One just for you and Blue?" And then, something magical happened. Elvis began to sing, "Love Me Tender." But this time it was different. It was quieter, more intimate, as if he was singing a lullaby. Sarah, gaining confidence, began to sing along in her small, sweet voice. The entire arena joined in. 30,000 people singing, "Love Me Tender," together, led by Elvis Presley and a 6-year-old girl with leukemia. It was the most beautiful sound anyone had ever heard. The band played softly, letting Elvis and Sarah's voices carry the melody. Margaret was crying so hard she could barely see. Even the security guards were wiping their eyes. When the song ended, the applause was unlike anything the Memphis Coliseum had ever heard. It wasn't just appreciation for a performance, it was love, pure and simple. Love for Elvis, love for Sarah, love for the moment that reminded everyone what really mattered. Elvis hugged Sarah tight and whispered something in her ear that only she could hear. Then he carried her backstage, where he spent another 30 minutes talking with her and her grandmother, signing autographs, and making sure Sarah knew she was special. Before they left, Elvis did one more thing. He took his own teddy bear, one that traveled with him on tour, as a reminder of home, and gave it to Sarah. "Blue needs a friend," he said. "And so do you." Subscribe now and leave a comment, because the most incredible part of this story is still coming. Sarah returned to her seat with 2 teddy bears, a scarf that belonged to Elvis's mother, and a memory that would sustain her through the hardest days ahead. Elvis finished the concert, but it was different now. Every song was dedicated to Sarah. Every movement seemed to carry the weight of the moment they had shared. The local newspaper called it "The Night Elvis Stopped Time." Video footage of Sarah singing with Elvis became one of the most requested clips in television history. But for Elvis, it was more than a moment of good publicity. It was a revelation. After that night, Elvis began making regular visits to children's hospitals. He would arrive unannounced, with no cameras, no publicity, just his guitar and his heart. He started a foundation to help families dealing with childhood illness. He never spoke about it publicly, but word spread through the Memphis community about Elvis's quiet acts of kindness. But the most amazing part of this story came 6 months later. Sarah's health improved dramatically. Her doctors couldn't explain it medically, but Margaret knew. It was hope. It was love. It was the memory of singing with Elvis Presley that gave Sarah the will to fight. Sarah lived for 8 more years, long enough to graduate elementary school, to learn to play piano, to write a letter to Elvis every Christmas. Elvis wrote back every time, always including a small gift and words of encouragement. When Elvis passed away in 1977, Sarah was one of the thousands who lined up to pay their respects at Graceland. She was carrying Blue and Elvis's teddy bear, both worn from years of love and comfort. She placed a single flower on his grave and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that love is the strongest medicine." The scarf that Elvis gave Sarah that night became her most treasured possession. She wore it during every hospital visit, every treatment, every difficult day. Her grandmother later said it was like Elvis's spirit was always with her, giving her strength. Sarah grew up to become a nurse, specializing in pediatric oncology. She spent her career bringing comfort to sick children, just as Elvis had comforted her. She kept the scarf in her office, and whenever she met a child who was scared or losing hope, she would tell them the story of the night Elvis stopped a concert for a crying child. The teddy bear that Elvis gave Sarah was donated to the children's ward at St. Jude Hospital in Memphis after Sarah's passing in 2018. It sits in the playroom, still bringing comfort to children who need to believe in magic. Share this story and subscribe. Let's make sure this incredible act of love is never forgotten. The Memphis Coliseum was demolished in 1999, but not before a plaque was installed commemorating the night of June 15, 1976. It reads, "In memory of the evening when Elvis Presley reminded the world that kindness is the greatest performance of all." Elvis's decision to stop his concert for Sarah changed more than just one little girl's life. It changed how the world saw him. He wasn't just the king of rock and roll anymore. He was a man who understood that sometimes the most important audience is an audience of one. The video footage of that night, grainy and precious, is still played at Graceland during tours. Visitors from around the world watch it and leave in tears. It's become one of the most powerful testaments to Elvis's character and his understanding of what it meant to use fame for good. Jerry Schilling, who helped bring Sarah backstage that night, later wrote, "In 20 years of working with Elvis, I saw him perform for presidents and royalty. But I never saw him more powerful than he was singing with a sick little girl who just wanted to feel loved." The impact of that single act of kindness rippled through generations. Sarah's story inspired countless others to pursue careers in medicine and child care. The foundation Elvis started continued long after his death, helping thousands of families facing childhood illness. Colonel Parker initially worried that stopping the concert would damage Elvis's professional reputation. Instead, it became the moment that secured his legacy as more than just an entertainer. It proved that Elvis Presley understood something that many celebrities never learn. True greatness comes not from how many people worship you, but from how deeply you love the people who need you most. Today, 47 years later, Sarah's story is still told in hospitals around the world. Nurses share it with young patients who are losing hope. Doctors reference it when explaining the power of emotional healing alongside medical treatment. Parents tell it to their children as an example of how one act of kindness can change everything. The scarf, the teddy bears, the moment, the song, they all became symbols of something larger than entertainment. They became proof that in a world that often feels cold and disconnected, love can still stop everything else and make miracles happen. That's the legacy of Elvis Presley. Not just the music, not just the movies, not just the fame. It's the memory of a man who saw a crying child and chose love over everything else. Who understood that sometimes the greatest performance is no performance at all, just one human being reaching out to help another. And every time someone stops what they're doing to help a child in need, every time someone chooses compassion over convenience, they're continuing the song that Elvis and Sarah started that night in Memphis. A song that reminds us that we're all connected, we all matter, and we all deserve to be loved.